everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We have our special continuing. This is the third episode of our special on Donald Trump, his policies, and his impact globally and, of course, here domestically in the United States. We're going to have a great conversation. I have two wonderful guests here with me today. I do have Mr. Jose Vega, and I have Gonzalo Duran, who will be joining me today to talk about, well, the Iran war and the impact of that globally, as well as many other issues that will be affecting us, not just in 2026, but throughout perhaps the next several decades. Now, we're going to jump right in before we allow my guests to tell us more about themselves. I think it would be more interesting just to jump right into it. And we're going to start with our very first question, which I think is timely. We are in day 2 of a ceasefire with Iran in the current conflict. And the question that I think is on the mind of most Americans is, what will be the impact of this U.S.-Iran conflict? Not just tomorrow, but in the next 5 years. And so, to my guests, I will ask, what do you believe is going to be the impact of this conflict in the next 5 years? I'll start with Jose first.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. It's good to be here. First of all, I think that question is largely dependent on what the population is going to do. You know, I think it can be defined right now depending on if we are going to go back to war or not. And if the United States is going to take an international approach to say, you know what, we screwed up, we should not have striked, or Trump, I guess, could have his out and say, well, we got rid of their nuclear material again for the second time. And hopefully the outcome that I would like to see for the next 5 years after this is good relations with Iran and China and Russia, where we can say we don't need to attack each other anymore. We can work things on the basis of diplomacy, and we can start reconstruction efforts of Tehran and other places that we've bombed and destroyed, so that the generations, the young people of these countries that we've destroyed, not just Iran, but Iran right now, will not grow a hatred for the quote-unquote Western countries that did this to them.
Okay. Before I go further, let me ask for a clarification. You said good relations. Just to be clear, what do you envision as good relations? What does that entail?
The United States joining the BRICS, frankly. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, plus now there's like 23 other countries that have decided to join the BRICS nations. And I think, the United States joining that and working hand in hand with Iran for joint mutual development cooperation. In other words, the entire region where Iran is and the United States need construction and reconstruction. Everybody can use modern technology and modern infrastructure, and if you were to use the engineers that you have now to train younger generations to become engineers to build these things, I think that's a way in which you can have, first of all, atonement for what we've done.
Atonement?
Yes.
Atonement.
Yeah.
Okay. Before we go further, because that brings up a lot of questions right there, but before we go further, let me allow Gonzalo to step in. Where do you see the 5-year point?
Well, obviously, I would love to see a world where we could all be, a utopia and be friendly with each other. But, realistically speaking, we're not in a situation like that. And, President Trump, I could see him making the plans in advance while he's still president for global security, for our infrastructure. This situation that's going on, obviously, oil prices will rise, and it will stay like that for many years to come. So we have to see what we're going to do in country to adapt to those things. And global, is war coming eventually? I mean, we always have to be in the predicament that is a possibility. And I think, we're setting up so that we can be in a better position, and hopefully, after the 2028 elections, we'll see what happens after that.
So, interesting point. You mentioned you expect that over the next 5 years, and by that point, oil prices will continue to be higher than they have been in the past. Do you have a specific number, either in gasoline or oil? What do you mean by higher prices?
So, a lot of Americans and individuals don't know that, the U.S. is a large producer of oil, and we ship it out to other countries, and we get a percentage coming back as well. And in one instance, it's cheaper to just get it from somewhere else than it is to ship it from across the country. That's one issue. Another one is, we don't control the oil prices. It's outside. It's a conglomerate of other organizations and entities that make up the market value. So, if we're at war with those people, obviously they're going to push up the prices, and that's it's a commodity that we have, but the world needs as well. And eventually there's going to be less and less of it. So there's always going to be a demand, and the higher the demand goes, the more infrastructure and finance is going to be.
So, if I'm understanding correctly, you believe we're going to be in the Iran conflict for 5 years?
If that, or is this going to escalate? President Trump making that stance, telling them they can't have nuclear weapons and attacking them, showed that we have a president that's willing to stand up for our interest and set this tone globally as well.
Unless it's Israel.
What's that?
Unless it's Israel.
Which is an ally, yes.
Because they have undeclared nuclear weapons, which is illegal under international law.
One moment. Before we get to that, and we will.
We're going to need more than an hour.
We need days, but my opinion on this, just to give a different contrast here, is I believe that this conflict will end probably by August, that we'll have a reasonable outcome. I do not expect oil prices to remain at the predicted levels of $150, $175. Realistically, and we're already starting to see that here with the ceasefire, prices have come down. We would see them somewhere in the $90 to $70 range, which is where they normally trade at. I think that's more realistic, and I think we're going to see, especially if the regime of Iran is toppled or diminished, that there will be more global stability in the world. There will be less global terror being brought about by Iran. That's what I expect over the next 5 years, and that is a benefit not just to the United States, that's a benefit to the entire world. That being said, now...
Is that your idea of a reasonable outcome? Because you said you expect a reasonable outcome, and then what you outlined after, is that your idea of a reasonable outcome?
That's absolutely reasonable. Less terrorism in the world is more stable for the world, and it is a benefit to every country on the planet. That's why, if we look at the responses for every country in the world, while they're making some talk about, Donald Trump, the United States, they're cowboys, look at the cowboys do what they're doing, they're also very happy about what we're doing. We're not having sanctions put against the president or the United States. We're not seeing countries deny trading with us. They have wanted this for decades, and we haven't had a president that has been strong enough or willing enough to actually do what needs to be done to reduce global terror.
Well, but if you really believe that a country is the largest sponsor of state terror, and then you go in and you attack it, and let's assume they're propagandizing their own people. The United States is the largest sponsor of terrorism.
That I absolutely disagree with.
Well, but then you go and then you bomb them. Aren't you creating a new generation of people who are going to hate your country?
No, actually, we're not. And I'm glad you bring that up because, and I think, Gonzalo, you may agree with me or you may disagree, but what we have targeted are not civilians, unlike Iran, which has used cluster bombs and cluster munitions, which are seen as being illegal across the world. They have enacted targets against civilians, and not just Iran, Israel, but all of its neighbors, and technically have the capability to reach London with their long-range ballistic missiles, we now know, based on their attack against Garcia Diego. We're looking at the world has been happy this has happened because of the terror that has affected every nation in the world. And you may disagree with the United States in some of our actions, but to say that the United States is a terrorist nation like Iran is, I cannot understand how you could come to that conclusion. I can understand that people may not like it, and that's a feeling, but factually, empirically, that's not correct. Now,
Well, I
before we go
agree with
further,
that. I am a patriot, first of all. But anyway,
I'm not presuming that you're not, Jose.
Sure,
Let me be clear. I'm not presuming that. The line of logic leads to a very difficult place for a lot of Americans to accept.
Sure.
Now, perhaps, in Gonzalo, you've heard my thought about that. What are your thoughts?
As a former United States Marine and Iraq veteran, global security is very important to me. And, we talked about us and what we just did with the Iran. I look at it as global security. We're on the tipping toe of, Russia, China, and these other nations coming together and, having an advantage not only with the commodities across the country, but also global security. We talk about overseeing and taking land, but there's other ways to do it now. Corporations within China, China's corporations to other countries, not only the U.S., but places like Jamaica and other places taking up land and minerals that we need is just one example of how you can do it without just a war. And the infrastructure of us attacking Iran recently, it decimates some form of infrastructure that they have. So the continued years of seeing those effects are going to hit America, in my point of view. So I think the oil is about maybe $100 a barrel right now.
No, it's closer to
90.
Where markets are closed at the moment, but the last close was about $95. It's trading at roughly between $92 to $98 based on speculation.
For me, when I see that, and I like to look at America's interests first before I look at the rest. And when I see something like that, I see, let's say, the electric car companies coming out more so, and then people that can afford those type of vehicles being the next wave of what's going to affect U.S. economy. So besides global security, what our economy, the resources that we need across the country, and then the effects that it has on the U.S. and the infrastructure that we have as well.
So if I'm understanding correctly, you think that the move towards renewable energy and to more electric style vehicles will reduce the global consumption of oil, reduce some of the economic pressures on the United States. Is that
yes?
correct?
But that's an effect of what's going to happen. That's what's happening and will happen since we are,
as a consequence of this conflict. Okay. I'm not sure that I agree with that, mostly because I don't think electric vehicles are, the entire push towards renewable energy hasn't been effective or efficient.
and hypocritical.
What's that?
And hypocritical. Because they got to mine the lithium. I mean, if it's done for environmental reasons, then they go to Venezuela. That's a whole other thing. And then they mine the lithium, and it's causing as much pollution as they're claiming it's going to,
Well, not just the mining of it, which is normally happening in poor black African nations,
right?
but also, so you have the mining, you have to transport that to be refined and then transferred through sea containers, there is no way to stop the pollution from that. And that's why electric vehicles are net not energy efficient. They can never recapture the greenhouse gases used. But not that I think man-made global warming is real. The whole climate, that's another conversation.
But it's a speaking point to the Democratic Party.
Yeah. It is a speaking point for certain political parties. But we're not trying to deal with the parties. We're dealing with how Americans, like yourselves, are looking at this and how you guys feel about it. Now, you mentioned something, Jose, that I think is kind of interesting. Actually, let me make it a little bit more broad. Can you both agree with me that if we see the regime of Iran toppled, that would bring more global stability to the world? Let's start with that.
No.
You're saying you disagree, and why is that?
This has always been a British provocation. You look back at the history of Iran when Mossadegh was here at the United States and he visited the Liberty Bell. And President Mossadegh, when it was a democratic state, said, if we yearn for liberty is because we share that same love of freedom as you Americans do. And he was there asking for help from America to have their own sovereignty and to own and nationalize their oil, which the British wanted. And what happened? The British then, said no, and then they overthrew the Iranian president, the democratically elected Iranian president, and for the last 70 years, it's just been a mishmash and thrown into a theocracy, and
okay. Let's understand, it's not been a mishmash for 47 years because the Ayatollah has been in charge and he has a theocratic, fanatical government that kills its own people. This year, 2026.
Like Netanyahu.
No, that was not Netanyahu. As reported by every internationally credible news agency, we know that somewhere between 5,000 and 40,000 Iranians were killed by the Ayatollah's government, and they were killing their own people because they complained that inflation had skyrocketed in Iran because of its poor economic policies. So you're looking to blame others for actions that happened in Iran, by Iran, against Iranians. So the British, who have not been involved in this conflict, and that's questionable whether they should or should not, they're not at fault for what the Ayatollah has done.
That's
Am
not
I
true.
incorrect about that, Gonzalo?
No, I agree with you. The only problem, the only disagreement that I would have is that the timeline. I hope that America can bring resolve by taking this action that is done and the oil prices go down and we stop the fighting. But I think it's going to push it, and the timeline for our resolve is going to could be years from now. I mean, we can start a war easily by doing what we're doing. It's not something that I want as a veteran, as an American, as a father. That's not something that I want for the world to see. But taking the direct action right now, for me, I can see why the president did it. I can see why taking the forefront of terrorism now is a step in a direction that we need for the future.
Okay. I don't think that we're going to have troops on ground, and
Didn't we already?
controversial. This is controversial. If we do have groups on the ground, then I believe we should take Iran, and that's been our single biggest problem with places like Afghanistan and Iraq. We haven't actually followed through. Our troops won the war, and we failed politically to do what was necessary: take over, make them a commonwealth, introduce the benefits of the United States, and in 2 generations allow them to become independent, a state, or a commonwealth like Puerto Rico. But that's a little bit too far. Let's take a step back before we get to that. There's something that you mentioned, Jose, that I find very significant, because you're looking at this conflict and its resolution as a benefit to the BRICS, the BRICS. And you mentioned the nations involved, although it's not 23 nations, many nations are considering joining it, which would be the bulk of that group. But the growth of the BRICS is dependent on the support of the Chinese yuan, their currency, which would devalue the United States dollar. It would, as a consequence, put the United States into depression that's unthinkable, and also affect other first world nations. Do you think that that's the best outcome in this situation?
The only reason the United States, first of all, is already in a Great Depression, regardless of what people may say, GDP numbers, so on and so forth. I mean, we've already seen changes to the yuan. It went from the petrodollar now to the petro-yuan. What country was it? I think it was Saudi Arabia is now starting to trade its oil in yuan. But the reason why the United States would be hit the hardest is because we've deindustrialized in the last 50 years. There was a concerted effort to remove productive labor from the United States. We've shut down so many factories and plants. We have lost the capabilities for productive powers to exist now. We are losing skilled labor at a rate that is very alarming, that at this point, if we want to rebuild that labor, we will have to import that labor to teach young Americans today. It's just the facts.
Well, let's clarify and let me make sure I understand. When we're speaking about skilled labor, we're talking about carpenters, electricians, we're talking about welders, we're talking about the trades specifically. And you're correct, America's been in dearth of that for a decade now, and that is something that is needed extremely. Although in the We saw that there was a massive push by Democrats, especially the Obama administration, to try and bring everyone to create a service economy in the United States rather than a manufacturing economy. And that has been overall, I believe we can say, a major failure. So I agree with you. We need to reinvigorate manufacturing, which I think the Trump tariffs were capable of doing, because that sparks self-reliance in the United States by not just importing everything, but creating it here in the United States. Looking at that, though, Gonzalo, do you think that the BRICS, the growth of the BRICS, the growth and influence of China, both economically as well as politically, that would be beneficial to the United States long term?
No, but there's a lot of things that I agree with Jose outside of these topics, but this is one of the things that I do believe to keep it more local. And this is a small example, but there's a company that's shutting down production of its musical productions, and the two best tuba makers in the world are losing their jobs, and it's being shipped over to China.
Are they here in the Bronx?
No, they're not in the Bronx, unfortunately. But just to give an example, even though all the musical production is going to be given out in the U.S., for high school bands and stuff like that across the country, they're still being made in China, even no longer being produced here. So that's just one small, tiny example so that the local individuals can understand the impact that something like that makes. Once again, I'm not 100% in agreement with everything Trump has done, especially the way he's rolled things out. But I believe in long term that the policies and that he's had tried to make, and that's pushed back by a lot of the Democrats, would benefit in the long term. And I think if he can get a lot of the things that he's getting resolved, one of the things is these issues that we're dealing with right now.
Okay,
I don't see that happening.
Well, is it a question of communication about this conflict, or is it about the conflict itself? Is there an aspect of it? Because you represent a different, you're speaking from a very different point of view. I think it's fair to say a more progressive point of view about the politics of the United States and our future. Is this for, and if I'm not being fair in my characterization, please let me know, but is it fair to say that you would rather see the United States take several steps back rather than actually achieve the goal in front of us?
I don't know what that means. What is the goal in front of us?
Well, the goal in front of us is to remove the Ayatollah, that regime, to reduce the amount of global terror, which would alleviate a lot of spending, a lot of problems for not just the United States, but the entire world. And that also means that BRICS, as a result of that, would have less significance.
Well, two things. One, BRICS represents an alternative to how the world could actually cooperate. Mm-hmm. I think the fact that you have a block of countries that are saying, let's figure out an alternative to this. And this comes back from the Bandung Conference of 1953, where Malcolm X was there present, but many nations were present. This was called the non-aligned movement. They said, we want nothing to do with nuclear weapons. We don't want to be bullied around by Western countries that do. I agree with that in spirit. Now, the second thing is that there is a theocratic nation already with nuclear weapons, and that is called the regime of Israel, because they have it in their doctrine called the Samson option, where they will use nuclear weapons if they ever feel an existential threat to their nation. And it's undeclared.
Well, that's nothing new. The United States would use nuclear weapons, as would any nuclear power, if they felt an existential threat to their nation. That's not new. Israel, by the way, is not a regime, it's a country. But that's not something that's really questioned. Any country would go to extreme, and that's kind of what we're looking at right now with Iran. Yes, it is the extreme of the Ayatollah and his theocratic, fanatical regime to try and hold on to power. The question is, can we give an opportunity for the people, and this has been the main goal of the Trump administration, though maybe poorly communicated, that they want to have the people rise up as they were in January before they started getting killed to try and seek a change in that government, which would benefit the people of Iran, the Middle East, and therefore the rest of the globe as a consequence.
Well, the president just admitted that the CIA gave weapons to protesters in Iran in January. The president admitted that they manufactured a lot of this protest.
I don't recall the president of the United States, Donald Trump, ever saying that.
No, he said that. It's a statement. I think he said this like a week or
Reported
two
by
ago. It was mainstream media. It was on CNN. I'll find it for you. Yeah, he said I shouldn't have said that, but he said the CIA gave weapons to protesters in Iran in January.
I can only say that I am unaware, and I follow almost all the internationally credible news agencies, and I do that on a daily basis. I have never heard that statement.
Sure, we can find it after.
Well, whether that statement is true or not, I don't know. But what I do know is that we do leave our weapons behind in places we go, and then they get used against us. That's something that I've been against my whole time.
Some presidents.
I'm not talking about presidents.
We're talking about
the policies for.
Well, I'm
the US
talking
government.
about specifically. We saw that with Biden in Afghanistan. He left behind tens of millions of our light armor, our ammunition, our firearms, which have been used by the Taliban, which currently is fighting with Pakistan, which is the mouthpiece, I believe, in my opinion, for China in these negotiations. But let's try and wrap up this segment of the question. I know there are many things we have not addressed yet, and it is a deep question. Many people will go further. At this moment, do you believe the ceasefire, 2 weeks, will that hold? Yes or no?
Well, you can't answer that in just a yes or no because it's dependent on Israel.
We have less than 5 minutes before we go to break.
Okay. It's
yes or no.
dependent. It's dependent on whether or not Israel will intervene, which they tried to, sabotage it by doing what they're doing in Lebanon.
Israel is not part of the U.S.-Iran ceasefire.
Yeah, we know. That's why they kept attacking Iran. Well, also anyway.
Separate country, separate issues.
But also, it's a matter of if the population, if the people of the United States are going to demand that we don't go back into it. Because right now, we probably will, especially if the administration is left to its own devices, given how erratic the president and its cabinet has been acting.
Right. So that would be a no. You do not believe the ceasefire will hold for various reasons, but you do not believe that. Okay, fine. So, Gonzalo, because we don't have a lot of time, I want you to get a
I'll keep it
chance.
simple. I say no, and it's evident because we have ships in that area. We just bombed them, and everything's like at a moment where it could tip over for almost anything. Who's going to back who? Who's going to back who? Do we have what it takes to take the step forward? Will President Trump be scared by the midterm elections? These are all factors that we have to think about.
Well, before we go to the break, and I'm hoping you're going to come right back, folks, we have so much more that we want to discuss with everyone here. But I will say that, in my opinion, the key answer is the Strait of Hormuz. I do not trust Iran. They're terrorists. They lie. I believe that they're going to try and close down the strait, and that will cause the end of the ceasefire. That's my belief. We'll see. Time will tell. But we're going to be going to a quick break. Please get a sip of water. Relax. We'll be right back, and then we'll be going on to our next topic, which should be quite interesting. Thank you. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us here today on our special talking about the Trump presidency, reviewing his policies and the impact that he is having globally and here in America as well. Obviously, you've already heard a little bit from both of my guests, and I think it's been quite the conversation, absolutely. Lively and informative in a lot of different views. But now, to give you a little more insight on each of these individuals, I'll let them introduce themselves. First, we have Gonzalo Duran. And Gonzalo, please tell us about it.
Well, thank you, Michael. My name is Gonzalo Duran. I am a former United States Marine Sergeant, born and raised in the Bronx. I'm currently the CEO of Devil Dog USA Incorporated and the chief editor of the Big Apple Gazette. Politically, I am the vice chairman for the Bronx Conservative Party, the district leader for the 79th Assembly District, and I'm currently running for Congress, District 15.
Oh, okay. That was brief, and he's also a really nice guy. We've been having some great conversations. Both I've spoken to you before publicly, and I've also had a great conversation with you today in the green room. Now, on my left is also a very interesting gentleman. I think people have found him quite unique. His name is Jose Vega. And Jose, please introduce yourself to everyone.
Sure. Well, my name is Jose Vega. I am a congressional candidate running for Congress in the Bronx, in the 15th Congressional District, both in the Democratic Party and as an independent. I have a long history of interventions where I go to different events and I stand up to people who tell lies, and these videos often go viral, whether it's State Department heads, media journalists, people who lie, or congressmen, or anybody really. I will confront them with the truth and expose it for the world to see, and I'm a about 10, 11-year associate of the LaRouche movement, and so I'm very proud to be here, and I'm 27 years old, and it's my second time running, and when I decided to run the first time 2 years ago, I told myself I can now either rent a car or run for Congress, and I rented a car at that point, so running for Congress it was.
Well, that's an interesting conversation to have with yourself. And I know how difficult it is to run for Congress. I've done it myself back in 2014. You've made quite the commitment. Actually, running in any election is a commitment to the public, and it takes a lot out. I thank you both for making that commitment to the public. And hopefully people will find this more interesting. By the way, I do want to mention, during the break, I was given access to a Fox News video from News Report from 6 days ago. It does seem that Donald Trump did make some allusion to having provided some protesters with arms. I will look into it more, but I did want to bring up, since I did question it, I did want to make sure that I brought up that correction. Thank you for that.
Of course, of course.
That brings us to our next topic, which I think is going to be also very interesting for a lot of people. We're all Hispanic men, so I think we may be a little bit more tuned into the culture of this, which is the question about Cuba. Since 1959, the United States has not had the best relationship with that nation. I think we all can agree with that. But in the most recent, this year, last several months, we've seen that that relationship between the United States and Cuba has taken on a new tone, so to speak. And we've heard recently, in recent comments from President Trump, that he may, quote, take Cuba. That being ill-defined, and no one's clear exactly what that might mean. So I want to ask each of you, in thinking about Cuba, its history, and looking at the current president and his administration, where do you think the United States is going to go with Cuba? What's going to be next? I'll start with you, Duran.
So, obviously, what's going on in Cuba right now, I want to make it very clear that as a humanitarian, I appall the way they're being treated. I understand the stress that the people that are going through, not only with their political regime, but also with their livelihoods. But I'm also pretty one-sided. It's well known and documented that my whole campaign and me as a individuals against communism. So I haven't heard of Trump wanting to take over. I didn't hear that part. I know the full embargoment or removing this, something like that happening. I can see something like that happening, but the embargo happening right now, I know it's devastating to the people, but where we go back to the conversation earlier, we're fighting for not only resources but defense and security. It's the reason why Cuba 50 years ago was in the position that it is in then, and why it's in the position that it's now. And just like we attacked Iran, if they put missiles and the other communist countries were able to put a defense area in Cuba, then we would have a problem. So when it comes to global security, and once again, that's one of my biggest priority, is we have to take a stand on it. Do I think the president's gonna try to take over it? No, I don't think so. Politically, I think it would hurt him too much right now, especially with the socialists inching his way across, taking away across the country. They're already taking over the Bronx, so it's a domino effect that's going to happen in the next couple of years.
Okay. I'm unaware of another scenario similar to the Cuban Missile Crisis in the 60s that was dealt with by John F. Kennedy, but it is a potential. That is something that could happen. We see a lot of interest starting to develop between China and Cuba. Previously, it was with the communist regime in Venezuela under Maduro that had been supporting Cuba for many years. So let me ask you, Jose, how do you feel about that?
There's a couple of ways I could go with this. First of all, I mean, absolutely what's going on is atrocious, and people want to blame communism for the state of Cuba before these sanctions were put on it. But the truth is, Cuba never had a chance to stand on its own. We've always been trying to meddle within the country. We've always been trying to go in and, overthrow the leaders. We've tried to kill Fidel Castro a million times, but that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is the fact that before there was the KKK, there was the Knights of the Golden Circle. This goes way back to the 1850s. And the real founder of the KKK is a man named Albert Pike, who Trump just put the statue back up in Washington, D.C. He's a Confederate. Traitor to the nation.
No.
Yes. Anyway, the Knights of the Golden Circle had a map, and in the center of the map is Cuba. That's what this is, because they wanted to take. Anyway.
I'm not familiar with. I can only state that it sounds like a conspiracy theory. I'm not familiar with
That's
it.
why I said I don't know if I want to go there, but that's the truth.
As I understand, it sounds somewhat like a conspiracy theory. Yes, Confederate soldiers have statues across this country. They are American citizens. They were. It is law.
And traitors.
For the United States. No, but that was resolved long before any of us were born, and the resolution was that Confederates are American citizens, period. Okay. And their statues are statues of American citizens. Now, that being said, that doesn't really address my question about current issues with Cuba. Cuba is a socialist nation and a wonderful representation of socialism in that it's a failed state. It has always been a failed state, and it has had a chance to stand on its own in that the Soviet Union, prior when it existed, was its key support and financier. Then that was followed up after the Soviet Union failed. We see that Venezuela stepped up most recently. Venezuela stepped up under its Chavez, and then followed by Maduro. It's had a lot of opportunities. It's just failed. Now, with that being said, I'll ask again, what do you think happens? Donald Trump has said that he is looking for significant change in Cuba, and he is willing to, quote, take it either politically and or directly. What do you see happening?
I think the president should take his nose out of other countries and decide to stop playing world police and dictating what countries should or shouldn't do. We should, like the same approach with Iran, is develop good relations with these countries of mutual development Cuba has made tremendous developments in the medical fields. They've developed vaccines that could be very helpful to a lot of American citizens right now if we had decided to lift certain sanctions that would allow these trades to go through. And instead, we have embargoes that kill the nation and also kill, United States citizens because we're missing out on the advancements that could be made for them. So, and for us. So, we need to stop. We need to release those sanctions, basically.
Okay, I have some major problems with Cuba myself, in particular the fact that Cuba most recently fired upon 10 American citizens, killed 4 of them, 6 have been taken and captured, and we have no idea. Cuba has not revealed what has happened to those individuals and their health status. That is a problem. That is a diplomatic situation that needs to be addressed, I believe. And obviously, when American lives are in danger, the United States should take every action possible. That's my standing on that aspect of it. In terms, it's a wide and broad subject, but so if I'm understanding you both gentlemen, you're both saying tread lightly, and it seems that there is some resistance to creating regime change, either politically and or directly.
Well, that's putting it very lightly. I am vehemently against regime change for Cuba.
And Gonzalo?
Obviously, I'm somebody who's against socialism, so obviously I would want fair and equal democracy in that country. How much influence that we should push will depend on the voters, and we talk a little bit about, let's say, the elections coming up. Florida is I think the 3rd largest voting state. So, and a majority of the population in the southern part of Florida that I know of is Cuban. So they help bring us into that position to say whether we're gonna, go forward, push it further for President Trump and give him that ability, or push back and see what happens.
Okay. So let me pose a hypothetical.
Okay.
Completely hypothetical. Let's say that the regime in Cuba, which is failing, and the Cuban people are upset with it, they've been upset with it for many years, but they're willing to rise up. We work out a deal, they will become a territory, potentially, it's up to a vote for the American people, that Cuba would become a territory similar to Puerto Rico. And in 2 generations, they would have the right to either become an independent nation again, or they could become remain a commonwealth, or to become a state of the United States. This allowing the country to rebuild its infrastructure, gain its footing, and to have a strong step forward. Would you support that kind of idea, or would you oppose that, and why? I'll start with you, Jose.
Well, first of all, glad it's a hypothetical, because I don't want Cuba to be treated like Puerto Rico. Look at what we've done to Puerto Rico. We've
the highest quality of life in the entire Caribbean.
Protected
by the United States from other countries.
We had sterilized 1/3 of Puerto Rican women, okay, through USAID programs. I mean,
we sterilized 1/3.
Yeah, this is a famous documentary. It's called
a big claim.
La Operación, which is a depopulation effort to do in Puerto Rico and also the South Bronx, where they were advertising these. All the modern women now are getting sterilized. That's right. They're getting parts of their, reproductive organs removed. And what they did was they would do a surgery where they would replace it with black thread. And they told them it was reversible, which it wasn't.
I'm sorry.
This was a depopulation effort that was done against Puerto Rico and also against New Yorkers, too.
Okay, maybe it's me. Maybe it's me.
Look it up, La Operación.
But my family, which is in Puerto Rico, some of them, a large part of it, are still on the island where we still own land. I've never once heard that, but I could be ill-informed. Mm-hmm. Gonzalo, have you heard about this?
Yes, and I'm aware of the video and documentary that Jose is talking about.
Okay.
And just to speak on that, once again, no nation is perfect, no government is perfect, and it's the atrocities of situations like that, which bring it hard for us to make changes now when we have a history of stuff like that.
Well, I can say that I'm surprised because I hadn't heard about that. And then again, it's not Thanksgiving table conversation. So that may be why I may not have heard about it from some of my relatives. I don't doubt, I question. And
I do that
think
all the
that's what
time
everyone
too.
should do.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, yeah.
With that said, so we have an impasse when it comes to Cuba.
Well, the hypothetical question that you asked, Jose, when I look at that situation, once again, any steps that we take is going to push back towards war, in my point of view. The further we go in putting our nose into these other countries puts us in a position that the world sees us as a threat. And although Jose and I both agree on many things, and one, we don't want war, we don't want death, we don't want these things, our actions and the way we go are completely different. When it comes to this situation, I think with the President Trump in power right now, and with the Republican fractions in power in all three cabinets, the trifecta, if you will, we have a better chance of having more, let's say, of the scenario happening where Cuba or another country having the ability to have democracy and freedom, et cetera, like that. But, once again, the socialist regime is pushing in. The tide for the Bronx is done. The country is next. And, when he's gone, what's going to happen? I don't know. Will everybody start bullying us and taking away Florida, then Mexico, then Canada, and then we're done for in a couple of years? I don't know.
We'll be okay. We'll be in the BRICS. We'll be fine.
No, the BRICS is the worst thing possible. That's a horrible idea. I know too much about BRICS. But in terms of Cuba, I think a very big aspect of it is, one, we have many Americans, most of them, yes, down in Florida, but many Cuban Americans who believe that this is something that would be beneficial for the United States. I also think it's an issue that has to be resolved because we do have a steady, ongoing inflow of Cubans since 1959 coming into the United States as refugees, which is a burden to the United States, and it's unending. And we seem to be approaching the point where we can get a resolution. I think that would be perhaps better for the nation. But that is a conversation that obviously has many nuances, as you just informed me of, Jose. So
Knights of the Golden Circle. Gotta look into
more
that.
information to look into, folks. And that's good, because the whole point is we're not the final answer here. We're here to help you get to the answer you want to have. So let me switch it up a little bit. Looking at the current political climate, I think we all can say that there is a political divide in America. Even within several of the parties, we see a lot of divides there as well. Do we expect that this political divide will increase or decrease as we get to and beyond the midterm elections, as we approach 2028? Does the Trump administration help America become more divided or help America become more unified, and why? Gonzalo, let's start with you.
Actually, I wish I was second, but to be honest, I think it's going to divide us more. And unfortunately, I see, the numbers, not specifically Democratic, but obviously Democratic positions, changing over to more socialist candidates, and that's where it's going to be the biggest battle that we're going to have. Not only because the Republicans keep on putting individuals that are, I believe, not to par, but also not having a full infrastructure, which I've seen firsthand within the Bronx Republican and the statewide and et cetera.
Okay. Let me go straight over to you, Jose. How do you feel?
Again, so many ways to take this, but I'll do an optimistic note. Recently the executive director of the Black Congressional Caucus issued a statement attacking me for saying that if I were in the Congress right now, I would have voted for Ro Khanna, Thomas Massie, or Marjorie Taylor Greene if she was still in the Congress, as Speaker of the House. And he decided to attack me, whatever. I exposed him, by the way, because it turns out when he was a student at Florida AMU, he was paid by AIPAC to go to Washington, D.C. 10 times. Regardless, my point is that Marjorie Taylor Greene and Ro Khanna have both put out statements talking about the need for a coalition of left-right, and that Marjorie Taylor Greene is even willing to go back to the drawing board and say, you know what, we need to figure something out because we need to move forward as a country and start over. No matter what she's done before in the past, no matter what she said, I'm sure she must have said some heinous stuff, but she is saying, let's start over from scratch. This is America. You have to take people at their word when they say that, especially somebody who lost it all, her credibility with the president. And Ro Khanna is saying he wants to have that conversation with her. Well, that is an invitation for all Americans to say, let's not be divided. Let us go back to the drawing board. And yeah, let us figure something else out new.
But you're not quite answering the question that I asked, which is, do you believe for the rest of 2026, even after the 2026 midterm elections and going into 2028, is America going to be more divided or more unified, especially in context of Donald Trump being president of the United States?
I think we can skirt Donald Trump. I think the population can skirt Donald Trump right now because I think the 25th Amendment should be invoked, frankly. But
Why?
Because he put out a Truth Social statement saying that he is going to end a civilization tonight.
Yes, and?
I
Wait
think.
a minute, let me step back a moment because I've heard this quote often, and perhaps it's been misunderstood. It has definitely been misreported. Initially, Donald Trump stated to try and free the Strait of Hormuz, he said that the United States would bomb the infrastructure, particularly the bridges and the power plants in Iran, which would bring them to the Stone Age. Those were his initial statements. That was underreported by the mainstream news media, and what was then his follow-up statement, because Iran was not reacting to that, he then gave a deadline and he stated he would take out their civilization, which is bombastic, of course, but that is not unusual for any leader of any nation at a time of military conflict.
And what did the Iranians do?
What was the result of that? Iran, being faced with that threat, actually took it credibly, and we now have a ceasefire and the Strait of Hormuz is being opened.
Actually, no, well, what happened was the people formed human chains and they sat on the bridges and the power plants, ironically, taking a Christian action and deciding.
Which people? In the United States?
No, in the Iran.
The protesters?
The Iranian people.
Oh, no.
They formed human chains to protect the infrastructure, and they were willing to die if the power plants and the bridges were bombed that night.
Individuals being forced by the IRGC and the Iranian government.
How do you know they were forced?
How do you know they were not?
This is one of the most literate nations on the planet.
It's one of the what?
Most literate nations on the planet.
It has nothing to do with anything.
Well, these people can think for themselves.
They can read. They have no internet.
There are one of the people I know, Jen Koonings, a white American woman, went over to Iran.
Has nothing to do with it.
Well, but she went over there to Iran, is my point. She was able to go in as an American, go in there and look in Tehran as to what's going on. She did this a couple months ago.
Okay, a couple of months ago, which is not the conflict right now.
Well, but I'm just saying she got a first-hand look at the population, or for example, there's a journalist there right now.
One moment, Jose, and I apologize.
No, of course.
But we're just about to run out of time, and I want to make sure that Gonzalo has something to say about this.
Well, just to add on, and as a party leader, if you guys don't mind me throwing this in there, I voted for Trump because I thought he was the best president or option that we had when they presented to us. Have I been opposed to a lot of things that he's done? Yes, I've been opposed to the way he wrote things out. But this situation right here, the conversation that we're having, and this is the thing that's keeping everything alive and progressing where I think we should be. The country will be divided, but at least the conversations are going to be had. When I look at Trump and what he's doing, saying the birthright situation, the attack or decimate, eliminate another country, it's when you're in these type of circles, there's a give and take of everything. There's deals that are being made, and that's not the way I want to do it, but that's the way it's being done. So at least when he goes to that extreme, I assume that he assumes that he's going to get somewhere in the middle or a little above than what we would get if he started lower than that.
Okay. Folks, we've had a lot of issues, and we only had 3 questions, really. And you can see how much conversation is available there. Obviously, I hope that you will continue to watch these Trump review specials that we've been doing, and I look forward to hearing all of your feedback. I have had two wonderful guests, Jose Vega and Gonzalo Duran, adding in their voices, which represent many of you out there, and yet there are many more who have not spoken up. I'd love to hear what you have to say about this as well. The one thing I think we all can agree on is that for America to remain America, all of our voices must be heard and we must speak up, and I'm looking forward to hearing you speak out. I am Michael Vasquez, and I am happy to be here with you today. This has been a wonderful program. I look forward to doing even more. Let me know what you think about it.